Is free speech under threat in the UK? With the rise of so-called non-crime hate incidents, arrests over grossly offensive memes, and the government's online safety bill threatening to clamp down on social media posts, can you really speak your mind in 21st century Britain? To find out, I spoke to Harry Miller, a former police officer who has had several run-ins with the law over supposedly offensive online posts. Harry Miller, your name has become synonymous with people who have been dealt with the police because of their offensive tweeting. Can you explain to viewers exactly what's happened to you recently and also in the past in your relationship with the police?
They came to me because I tweeted about gender critical content. I'd famously retweeted what they described as a limerick. It wasn't a limerick, it was a piece of feminist doggerel. Nevertheless, somebody, don't know who they were, they decided that this had caused them great offence and they contacted Humberside Police, and Humberside Police then contacted me. Essentially what they said was that even though I'd committed no crime, if I continued not committing crime, that could in some weird way escalate to crime. I don't understand the magic behind that, I never have done. Nevertheless, that's what they said.
Okay, so can you explain your High Court victory against the police? What happened there?
After the police got involved with me, I realised that this was a breach of my human rights, Article 10 specifically. So we took Humberside Police to the High Court. Weirdly, we won. When the police come against you because you have said something that is controversial, or because some trans person somewhere decided that they didn't like it, that when they take that trans person's moan seriously and they come and try and censor you, that is entirely illegal. And Mr. Justice Knowles equated it to the Gestapo and the Stasi. He said, we've never had a Gestapo or a Stasi in Britain. The actions of Humberside Police came way too close for comfort, and we now have a precedent set in the High Court that when the police do that again, we can just tell them, no, 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 no.
What do you say to people who don't particularly like you, don't like what you're saying?
I say tough. I really don't care whether you like me. There is only one question that needs to be asked. Are we on the right side of the law? It's absolutely immaterial whether you like us or whether you like our message. Providing we stay law-abiding, the police have no right whatsoever to interfere with our freedom of expression.
You may be wondering what exactly is the legal justification for arresting people over their tweets. I went to Lincoln's Inn to speak to Dr. Anna Lutfi, an equality and human rights barrister, to understand the law around freedom of speech and how it's under threat. So what actually is a non-crime hate incident?
That's an excellent question, Stephen, and I think it's one that you should ask Priti Patel, our Home Secretary, because I don't think anyone knows by this stage. We have policies that have been drafted and exist in writing, and if you go to the College of Policing website and Google non-crime hate incidents in the search engine, you'll find what purports to be a definition, but I mean, good luck with that. You could be a PhD in linguistics and make no sense of it. It's utterly incoherent. It's basically the idea that if somebody finds something offensive and they report it to the police as such, then that person hasn't committed a criminal offence, but they've committed a non-crime incident which has some consequences akin to having committed a criminal offence. Basically, in Orwellian terms, a non-crime crime. Will it be recorded against your name? That would be at the arbitrary discretion of the police officer involved. Will it show up on a DBS check? It might not. Is it something that's likely to affect you negatively in your career as you apply for jobs? Possibly. These are all questions that go unanswered, and they very much rest on the individual case-by-case basis, which is not, as you may well appreciate, the basis for a sound democratic legal system. We are now living in a society where using social media puts you automatically at risk.
Human rights is a concept that should be applied equally to everyone. That's the whole idea of human rights. How do you as a human rights lawyer view these recent arrests and view these recent cases to do with causing gross offence, etc.?
What's important to understand about human rights is that the right evolved alongside the obligation. And one of the things that people forget when they talk about individual human rights is that they belong within a general constitution that brings about obligations such as obligations to enact scrutiny of law, obligation to make sure that law is proportionate, obligations to make sure that checks and balances are enacted. That's why democratic countries have constitutions. And human rights outside of that constitutional context mean nothing. Everyone can scream and shout that they have a human right, but without the constitutional checks and balances, we don't have human rights. And what really concerns me, for example, we've seen this spate of arrests where someone recently, and we're seeing more and more people arrested with reference to Section 127 of the Communications Act, which refers to electronic materials sent containing grossly offensive content. Now, there is a constitutional principle that no one seems to be observing here, which is the intention of Parliament. What did Parliament intend when it drafted the Communications Act 2003? It clearly had no intention of criminalising or quasi-criminalising anyone who shared a meme on Facebook, because when it was drafted, the concept of Facebook memes was not a structuring principle of the legislature. So we're in this situation now where 21st century culture wars are being invoked in the interpretation of parliamentary statute. And that gives rise to a total, again, Wild West scenario where human rights are what anybody says, and it's just a question of whether an arbitrary decision maker will act in your favour or not.
The government's long-awaited online safety bill has also come under scrutiny from free speech campaigners. This new law, if passed, could have serious consequences for social media companies when it comes to regulating their users' content. I spoke to Victoria Hewson of the Institute for Economic Affairs to explain the consequences of the bill.
The online safety bill will affect freedom of speech in a couple of different ways. First of all, it creates some new criminal offences, some new speech offences to do with harmful communications. Now, on the positive side, it will repeal the existing communications offences under the Communications Act 2003 and the Malicious Communications Act. They will both be repealed, which is certainly very welcome because they're both two very pernicious pieces of legislation. Unfortunately, the new offences that have been constructed to replace them could actually end up being even worse because they are based upon the concept of causing harm to a likely audience. And harm in the harmful communications offence is defined as severe distress. And so anyone who makes a communication, which could include a WhatsApp message, or it could include a posting on Facebook or Twitter or any manner of these kinds of fora, if they do it intentionally knowing that there might be someone who might possibly receive it, who would be distressed by it, that will be a criminal offence.
So it's not just the new offences that have been created, but there's also been controversy over this idea of saying something that's legal but harmful. Can you delve into that issue?
For the biggest online platforms, they will also have to put new systems in place to deal with what's this new thing that's been created, priority content that's harmful to adults, I think is the technical term for it. And they won't strictly have to take it down. This is how the Secretary of State has been defending this measure, saying, no, we're not forcing you to censor this kind of legal but harmful content. We just want you to be clear and transparent about what you're going to do with it on your service. And they will make a list. This Secretary of State is going to make a list of what comprises this new category of legal but harmful. And it's going to be things like health misinformation, which is a little bit worrying, to be honest, because we've seen a lot of things that were classed as health misinformation that actually turned out to be true. So already we've got some alarm bells here. But Nadine Dorries and others will say, no, but we're not forcing people to take this down. We just want the platforms to be clear and honest about what they're doing with it. But can you seriously imagine any platform putting in its terms and conditions, yes, we carry legal but harmful content, and that's it, we're not going to do anything about it, it's up to you.
When looking in a broader sense, not just the Online Harms Bill, but all the other legislation that's used to go after people for online content, do you think that we have free speech in the UK?
It's a great question, because I suppose the answer is we have free speech as long as we don't want to say anything that's going to be too controversial or offensive. And that's technically not how the law should work. There's a long-standing case law from the European Court of Human Rights that says even, or perhaps especially, speech that is offensive or distasteful is protected speech. But in practice, we have so many laws on our books to do with hate crimes, inciting racial hatred and religious hatred, all of these kinds of speech offences. And actually in quite a sort of nannying moralistic way as well, where people are prosecuted for making mean jokes about Captain Tom, for example, or even, you know, I'm going to go out there and say prosecuting people for making extremely repulsive and distasteful jokes about something like the Grenfell fire disaster. I think we can all agree that that is morally repugnant, but should it be illegal? Should people get a criminal record for making distasteful jokes?
As more people are questioned by the police over their online comments, pressure is only rising not to share controversial opinions. After 12 years of Conservative rule, questions remain as to whether this government is committed to protecting freedom of speech.